Donald Trump is threatening to deploy the U.S. military inside America. Here's why. Trump threatens to invoke Insurrection Act as protests erupt in Minnesota. In mid-January 2026, former U.S. President Donald Trump issued a dramatic warning that he could invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807 to suppress ongoing demonstrations in Minnesota, a move that thrust the nation into fresh political controversy and brought sharp debate over federal power, civil rights, and immigration enforcement. A surge of tension, Minneapolis at the epicenter. The threat came amid escalating unrest in Minneapolis, where protests have grown in response to a federal immigration enforcement operation led by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. At the heart of the unrest was the fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good, a 37-year-old woman, by an ICE agent during an enforcement action in the city. Her death sparked immediate outrage and large demonstrations. Just days later, another controversial incident occurred when a federal agent shot and wounded a man in the leg during a separate operation in North Minneapolis, further increasing tensions. Trump's warning: invoke the Insurrection Act. Facing mounting protest activity, Trump posted on his social media platform, Truth Social, that he was prepared to invoke the Insurrection Act, a rarely used federal law that allows the president to deploy U.S. military forces domestically to restore order, bypassing normal restrictions on using the military for civilian law enforcement. He described Minnesota officials as corrupt politicians and labeled demonstrators as professional agitators and insurrectionists who were attacking the patriots of ICE. Trump said that if local leaders failed to control the unrest, he would institute the Insurrection Act and quickly put an end to the travesty. What the Insurrection Act means. The Insurrection Act of 1807 is an age-old statute giving the president broad authority to use federal troops or federalize the National Guard to suppress rebellion or domestic violence when state authorities cannot maintain order. Its language has been interpreted broadly, and, crucially, it does not clearly define what constitutes an insurrection, leaving the determination largely to the president's discretion. Although the act has been invoked more than 24 times in U.S. history, most recently during the 1992 Los Angeles riots, its use is seen as extraordinary and fraught with constitutional and political implications. Political and legal pushback. Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey strongly discouraged escalation, urging protesters to remain peaceful and calling for de-escalation. They criticized federal tactics and warned that military deployment could worsen rather than calm tensions. Meanwhile, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison indicated the state would legally challenge any attempt to invoke the Insurrection Act. Civil liberties advocates have similarly raised concerns about the broad and potentially unchecked use of federal military power against predominantly peaceful demonstrations, a flashpoint in broader national debate. The Minnesota unrest and Trump's threat come at a time when immigration policy and federal-state relations are deeply divisive issues in American politics. Trump's readiness to cite a law last prominently used decades ago underscores how intense and polarized the political climate has become, particularly around border enforcement strategies and civil dissent. Critics argue that branding protests as insurrection risks conflating lawful public dissent with violent rebellion, a distinction that has been fiercely discussed in recent years following other major protests in U.S. cities. Supporters of Trump's stance say that a strong federal response is necessary to back law enforcement and uphold order. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment below.